The church gleamed under the soft glow of golden chandeliers, and the air was thick with expectation. Guests murmured softly among themselves, adjusting their attire and stealing glances toward the bride, who stood at the edge of the aisle. Her gown shimmered with delicate embroidery, flowing like a river of ivory silk down to the polished floor. She had dreamed of this day for years, or at least what she thought was her dream. As the organ played the opening notes, she inhaled sharply, her heart racing with anticipation. The crowd's collective gaze bore down upon her, each eye filled with curiosity, admiration, or judgment. She took a tentative step forward, her heel clicking against the marble floor. She felt the weight of expectations pressing against her chest, the expectations of family, of society, and even of herself. Yet, in the back of the church, someone was watching her differently. A man whose eyes spoke a language no one else understood. He was quiet, composed, yet his gaze was relentless, unwavering. In that moment, she felt a strange, magnetic pull, a sensation that made her hesitate mid-step. Something about him tugged at the deepest corners of her heart. The groom, waiting at the altar, straightened his tie and smiled confidently. To everyone else, he was the perfect match. Handsome, wealthy, poised. But as she glanced toward him, she realized that the connection she had felt earlier was missing. She couldn't ignore it, no matter how hard she tried. The first few steps seemed endless. Every movement was magnified, every whisper carried across the pews. And then it happened. She stopped, her eyes locking with the man in the back. In that instant, the world fell away, leaving only the two of them suspended in a moment that seemed both dangerous and irresistible. The guests shifted uneasily, sensing the sudden tension. The groom's smile faltered, confusion crossing his face. He didn't understand why she had paused, why her eyes had left him. But she did. She felt a truth so profound it was almost unbearable, the realization that her heart had never truly belonged to the man at the altar. Her knees threatened to buckle as memories flooded her mind, moments stolen, letters unopened, glances shed in secrecy. She had loved another man for years, a love buried beneath layers of obligation and duty. She had tried to push it down, to convince herself that the life she was walking into now was the right one. But standing in the aisle, feeling the intensity of his stare, she knew she couldn't. The billionaire, standing silently in the shadows, seemed to sense her inner turmoil. He had always watched over her, protected her from afar, and waited for the day when she would see the truth for herself. Now that day had arrived. A soft murmur traveled through the congregation, as if everyone sensed the storm brewing between past and present, duty and desire. She felt every eye on her, yet she was utterly alone in her decision. The organ's notes felt distant, irrelevant, as if the music itself were merely a backdrop to the drama unfolding in her chest. The groom took a step forward, concern etched across his face. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice trembling slightly. But she couldn't answer. How could she explain that the man she truly loved was standing mere feet away, and that the vows she had prepared to recite felt hollow and meaningless? Tears threatened to spill over as she swallowed hard, gripping the bouquet in her hands. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to run into the arms of the one who had always held her heart. She knew that once she walked down the aisle fully, she would be crossing a line from which there was no return. And then, without warning, he moved. The billionaire began walking toward her, his steps deliberate, measured, yet filled with undeniable urgency. The room seemed to contract around them, time slowing as each step drew them closer together. She could feel the electricity in the air, the tension crackling like a storm about to break. Her heart pounded wildly as their eyes met. He reached her side, whispering a single word that carried a lifetime of emotion: "Now." The bride took a deep breath, realizing that the moment of truth had arrived. She had a choice to make: follow the path she had been told to take, or finally embrace the love she had been denied for so long. The billionaire didn't wait for permission. He reached for her hand, his touch warm and familiar, sending shivers down her spine. The guests gasped audibly, some rising from their seats in shock, while others clutched their pearls and ties in disbelief. No one had expected this turn of events, not even the groom, whose composure began to crumble under the weight of public humiliation. "Stop this," the groom said, his voice sharp now, laced with panic. "This is your wedding. You can't." "I can," she interrupted, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. "I can because this is my heart. And my heart belongs here." Her words hung in the air like a lightning strike, electrifying the room. Some guests whispered apologies for the disruption, while others sat frozen, unable to look away. She could see disbelief, judgment, and awe painted across every face, yet none of it mattered. She was no longer a passenger in her own life. She was the pilot steering toward the truth she had denied for far too long. He pulled her gently away from the aisle, their fingers interlaced like a lifeline. Each step was a declaration, a rebellion against convention, a promise that love would not be silenced. The guests parted automatically, their murmurs forming a wave of anticipation and excitement that filled the church with an almost tangible energy. The groom stepped forward, desperation flashing in his eyes. "Please stop this. Think about what you're doing." "I am," she said softly, yet firmly, holding his gaze for just a moment before turning back to the man who had never left her heart. "I've never thought about anything else." The tension was unbearable. She could feel every heartbeat, every glance, every judgment suspended in the moment. And yet, beneath it all, there was clarity. The path she had feared was now illuminated, and she could finally see where she was meant to be. By now, the church was buzzing with anticipation. Cameras on phones clicked, whispers swelled into murmurs, and a few bold guests even whispered prayers for courage. Every step they took seemed measured and purposeful, their combined energy commanding the attention of everyone present. She glanced at him, feeling the surge of emotion in her chest. He had waited silently, watching over her, never interfering until the moment was right. Now his hand in hers was both a shield and a declaration, protecting her from the chaos while making a statement she had been too afraid to voice herself. The groom, now pale and sweating, realized he had lost control. The ceremony had transformed into something entirely different, something raw, real, and unforgettable. He tried to speak, to interject, but words failed him. Every syllable that had once seemed commanding now fell hollow in the face of undeniable truth. Her heart raced as she looked forward to the altar, seeing the empty space meant for vows. But she didn't need it anymore. She didn't need a ritual to define her choice. Her choice was defined in her heart, in the grip of the hand that had always waited for her. The murmurs in the church had grown into a symphony of disbelief and curiosity. Some guests whispered apologies for staring, while others couldn't tear their eyes away from the scene unfolding before them. Cameras clicked relentlessly, capturing a moment that would be replayed countless times, yet nothing could capture the raw intensity of what she felt inside. He turned to her, his gaze steady, unwavering, filled with a lifetime of restrained emotion. "You don't belong there," he whispered softly, his voice carrying over the din of murmurs. "You've never belonged there." Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the certainty behind them. The clarity of the emotion he exuded was undeniable, raw, and painfully beautiful. She could feel her heart pounding, the rhythm of her pulse matching the rhythm of the growing storm around them. The groom, now pale as a ghost, staggered forward, trying to regain control of what had clearly slipped out of his hands. "This is ridiculous." "You're making a scene," he snapped, but even he could feel the fragility of his authority crumbling. "No," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I'm finally making sense of it." She turned fully toward the man she had always loved, seeing in his eyes the reflection of every unspoken promise, every moment of longing, every touch that had never been shared but had been felt in her heart. He stepped closer, holding her hands in his. The warmth of his palms, the firmness of his grip, sent shivers through her spine. "I've waited," he said softly, "for the day you'd realize where you truly belong." The crowd seemed to hold its breath, watching the unfolding drama with bated anticipation. Some guests whispered prayers, some gasped audibly, and some simply stared in stunned silence. Yet she felt nothing but the magnetic pull of his presence, the undeniable connection that had survived time, distance, and the weight of expectation. "You've waited?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, yet filled with wonder and disbelief. "Yes," he said. "For every day that I've had to stay silent, for every moment I had to watch from afar, for every chance I thought I had lost, you were always mine. You just didn't know it yet." Tears brimmed in her eyes, but they weren't tears of fear or hesitation. They were tears of relief, recognition, and the deep, overwhelming joy of finally being seen, truly seen, by the one person who had always mattered most. The groom tried one last desperate plea. "Think about what you're doing. Society, family, this is all you've ever wanted." She shook her head slowly, feeling the weight of years lift off her shoulders. "I've never wanted anything except this," she said, squeezing his hands tightly. "I've never wanted anything but you." Gasps echoed through the church, but the crowd was powerless to interrupt the force of the connection now pulling them together. Their love, long restrained, had become a tidal wave, sweeping away hesitation, doubt, and obligation in a single unstoppable surge. By now, the murmurs in the church had transformed into a low hum of awe and astonishment. Cameras flashed, capturing every detail of the moment that had defied expectation and shattered convention. It wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a spectacle of raw, undeniable love, a story that would ripple far beyond the walls of the church. She held his hand tightly, the warmth of his palm grounding her, giving her strength. For years, she had endured uncertainty, fear, and expectation, but in this instant, every doubt was swept away. Every whispered warning, every societal pressure, every plan imposed upon her life, none of it mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was him, the man who had always seen her, understood her, and waited for her. The billionaire's eyes never wavered from hers. In them, she saw a reflection of her own heart, steady, passionate, unwavering. "No one can tell us what we feel," he whispered. "No one can dictate what's right for us. Today we claim our truth." Around them, the guests watched in stunned silence. Some were shocked beyond words, others teary-eyed in empathy, and a few struggled to suppress smiles of admiration. Love had just declared itself louder than tradition, louder than expectation, and the energy in the room was electric. The priest, finally recovering his composure, took a deep breath. "This is unlike anything I've ever witnessed," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "But it is clear that the bond you share is genuine, profound, and undeniable." She smiled at him, grateful for his honesty. The truth of her heart had been validated not just by the man she loved, but by the world around her. She had chosen courage over comfort, authenticity over convention, and love over fear. Turning back to the billionaire, she felt tears stream down her face. "I was afraid for so long," she admitted. "Afraid of what people would think, afraid of losing you, afraid of stepping into the unknown. But I can't fear anymore. Not when this is real. Not when this is us." He kissed her forehead softly, a gesture so intimate and tender that it drew gasps from the crowd. "We've waited too long for this moment," he said. "Now it's ours. Every second, every heartbeat belongs to us." Outside, the sky had begun to change, streaks of golden sunlight filtering through the stained glass windows. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath as if acknowledging the significance of what was unfolding inside. Every observer, every whispered conversation, every stunned gaze was now part of the story they were creating together. For the first time in her life, she felt fully alive. The layers of obligation, doubt, and societal expectation peeled away, revealing a heart free to love without restraint. And in that freedom, she realized something profound. Love isn't about rules or rituals, it's about connection, understanding, and courage. The billionaire tightened his hold on her hand, sensing her revelation. "We will face everything together," he said softly. "The world may not understand, but we do. And that's all that matters." As they prepared to leave the altar, the crowd erupted into applause. Some clapped hesitantly, still shocked by the unfolding drama, while others cheered freely, celebrating a love that had conquered fear, doubt, and expectation. Cameras captured every moment, but the raw emotion, the trembling hands, the teary eyes, the racing hearts, could not be contained by pixels or lenses. For her, this was more than a wedding. It was a declaration of self, a triumph of courage, and a moment that would forever define her life. And for him, it was the culmination of years of waiting, watching, and loving from afar. Together, they had transformed a simple ceremony into a legendary story of heart, soul, and unbreakable connection. The priest, still standing with his hands trembling, watched as the drama unfolded. For the first time in his decades of officiating weddings, he felt completely powerless. This was no longer a ceremony he controlled. It had become a story, one of love, defiance, and raw emotion, that would forever be etched in the memories of everyone present. He glanced at the bride, seeing the mixture of fear, excitement, and certainty in her eyes. She was trembling, but not with hesitation. She was trembling with the intensity of the choice she had made, the truth she had finally embraced. He turned to the groom, who now looked defeated, his polished facade shattered. The crowd had shifted, silently taking sides without realizing it. Some whispered sympathies, some stared in awe, but all of them understood that a life-altering moment was taking place before their eyes. The billionaire stepped forward, drawing closer to the bride. "If anyone questions this," he said, his voice steady and commanding, "I will answer. I have loved her from afar, waited for her, and I will continue to wait if I must. But today she chooses me." A hush fell over the church. The weight of his words, the sincerity in his voice, struck every heart in the room. People felt it, they could sense the depth of his devotion, the history of unspoken promises, and the courage it took to claim the love that was rightfully his. The bride's fingers trembled as she reached for him, and he enveloped her hand in his, anchoring her to the reality they both knew was inevitable. "I love you," he whispered again, just for her. "And nothing in the world will ever change that." Tears slid down her cheeks as she realized the truth. She had been waiting for this moment her entire life, even if she hadn't known it. The weight of expectations, the fear of scandal, the sense of duty, all of it faded in the presence of a love so powerful that nothing could resist it. The groom took a staggering step back, understanding finally that his time had ended. The ceremony, the traditions, the plan, it was all meaningless now. The bride had found her truth, and he could not stop it. The guests, sensing the shift, erupted in whispers, some standing to witness the miracle of a love so fiercely claimed. The billionaire drew the bride closer, their foreheads touching, and the energy in the room shifted from shock to awe. This was not just a wedding, this was a declaration, a revelation, and a triumph of the heart over convention. She looked around at the crowd one last time before focusing on him. "I choose us," she said, voice firm and unwavering. "Always us." He smiled, relief and joy flooding his face. "Always us," he echoed. And in that instant, the church seemed to hold its breath, every heart beating in silent solidarity with the undeniable truth of their love. The church doors opened, allowing the late afternoon sunlight to spill in, illuminating their path as they stepped forward together. Each step felt heavy with significance, as if the ground itself recognized the importance of their journey. Guests continued to murmur in awe, some still frozen in disbelief, others visibly moved by the courage and love that had triumphed that day. As they walked down the aisle hand in hand, she realized the weight of the choice she had made. It wasn't just about love, it was about claiming her life, her identity, and her freedom to follow her heart. The billionaire's presence beside her made her feel invincible, his unwavering support giving her the strength to face whatever the world might throw their way. Outside, a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, perfectly timed as if nature itself was celebrating their union. The world, it seemed, had paused to witness the power of love over convention, desire over fear, and destiny over doubt. They reached the waiting car, the polished limousine gleaming in the sunlight. Reporters and photographers gathered at a distance, capturing images that would circulate worldwide, yet none of them could capture the intimacy of the connection they shared. She felt his gaze on her, steady, protective, and filled with an unspoken promise. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Inside the car, the silence between them was comfortable, a shared acknowledgement of the journey they had taken. "Do you realize," she whispered, "that we've changed everything today? Not just for ourselves, but for everyone watching." He smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes," he replied. "And it doesn't matter. What matters is that we've chosen each other. That's the story worth telling." As the car rolled away from the church, she reflected on the moments leading up to this day, the hesitation, the fear, the stolen glances, the silent longings. Every emotion, every encounter, every choice had led them here. And in that realization, she felt a profound sense of peace. The billionaire reached over, taking her hand in his, their fingers entwining perfectly. "We've waited long enough," he said. "Now we live fully, openly, and together. Nothing can change that." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness or fear, but from a deep, overwhelming joy. For the first time, she felt truly seen, understood, and loved. And in that love, she found the courage to step forward into a future filled with promise, adventure, and the unbreakable bond they had finally claimed. As they drove through the city streets, guests and onlookers watched in awe, some cheering, some whispering, all moved by the story of love that had unfolded before them. It was a story of courage, defiance, and the undeniable power of connection, a story that would be told and retold for generations. By the time night fell, the city lights reflected in the limousine windows, casting a warm glow over their intertwined hands. It was more than a wedding. It was a declaration that love, true and unyielding, could conquer all obstacles. And as she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her own, she knew one undeniable truth. They had chosen each other, and that choice would define their lives forever. No more hesitation. No more fear. Only love, fierce, relentless, and real. The world had watched, but it no longer mattered. Their hearts, now finally aligned, would guide them through everything that lay ahead. Together, they had rewritten their story, and nothing, no societal expectation, no obligation, no obstacle could ever take it away. The billionaire squeezed her hand gently, a silent vow of endless devotion. "Always us," he whispered. "Always us," she echoed, her voice steady, unwavering, and filled with the certainty of a love that had finally found its home. And with that, the doors of their past closed behind them, and the path ahead shone bright with the promise of a love that would endure, defy, and inspire for a lifetime.